My name's Beth. I'm a founder of Unspun. We're building custom fit and 3D weaving tech to enable mass customization and also automated on-demand manufacturing. You can try out our software today, which is being used by H&M's Weekday and other brands and our own brand. You can go to unspun.io to try designing your own jeans with our visualizer, or you can sign up to be a beta tester for our new app at unspun.io/beta. And yes, behind me this is a real background. This is me in real life in the retail store of Unspun in San Francisco. So now I'd love to jump into our intros with our really excellent panelists. So first, Troy Nachtigall. He's a professor of fashion research and tech at Amsterdam University of Applied Science. Welcome, Troy.
Thanks, Beth. So hi, I'm Troy. I run the 3D knitwear field lab at my university. So we're looking at all sorts of data-driven personalization and ultra-personalization. I did my PhD on the subject a few years back, so very excited to see so many people interested in the subject.
Great to have a PhD here. And to you, Nathalie Roganova, CEO and founder of Dressarte Paris.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nathalie. I'm founder of Dressarte. Dressarte is eco-friendly online couture service, enabling 3D design and virtual measurement taking. So we help customers to design their own garments, online, straight from home, and we use dead stock, surplus, and upcycled fabrics to produce those garments according to their body measurements. The whole process is online based, like I mentioned, and we create a whole range of clothing from bridal wear to capsule wardrobes.
Great to have you here, Nathalie. Thank you. Next to Michael Wieser, founder and creative director of Yokai Studios. Hi, Michael.
Hi. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Michael, and I'm the co-founder and creative director of Yokai Studios. We are a small startup located in Austria, and our research is focused in using automation technology for on-demand production of garments and textile goods. And we recently also started a tiny brand where we already use industrial robots to individualize garments on demand.
Ooh, I'm excited to hear more about this. Next to you, Ganit Goldstein. She's a 3D designer at Ganit Goldstein. Hi, Ganit.
Hi everyone. So I'm a 3D fashion designer, and I'm now doing my master's degree at the Royal College of Art, and I'm working on the intersection of craft methods and the latest technology of 3D printing and how to combine multicolor 3D printing with 3D scanning.
That's great, and you can see a sample of her work right behind her there. And great. Last but not least, Morgan Linton. She's the COO and co-founder of Bold Metrics.
Hi, really great to be here. Yeah, I'm the co-founder of Bold Metrics, based in San Francisco. We have a technology that does AI body scanning, essentially allowing for a very accurate, scalable way to power the fit side of the on-demand ecosystem. Really excited to be here, both in talking about, the importance and the shift to on-demand, and also about that impact on sustainability, because I think those two really go hand in hand. So yeah, really looking forward to the discussion.
Amazing. This is a great group we have here. Thank you so much for the intros. So let's get into it. On-demand manufacturing, which is really producing upon individual consumer demand, makes sense for a number of reasons, but it hasn't caught on across the industry quite yet. I'm excited to dig into how 3D and digital assets can help our industry move forward from the current, guess and check model that we have right now to the on-demand manufacturing model with this super all-star panel right here. First, let's kick off with understanding why we are taking on the challenges of on-demand and digitalization to begin with. So I'm going to start with Nathalie and Morgan. First with you, Nathalie. Do you believe that sustainability is the biggest contributor to the development of 3D and on-demand manufacturing, or do you think it's something else?
Well, I can say, if I should divide this question into two parts, I would say that there is on-demand manufacturing and then there is 3D. So as someone who works directly with consumers, we can say that sustainability plays a huge role into on-demand manufacturing. And we can see that especially, during events like Fashion Revolution Week, for example, when, the overall awareness is increasing towards sustainability, and especially to alternative ways of doing fashion. And, so the answer is absolutely yes. Sustainability, people are just getting more educated, and they want to know exactly how the clothing are made, and then, who made the items, what kind of materials were used, and all this, aligns perfectly with on-demand manufacturing, and especially because it's a great way to reduce waste in the fashion industry. So to sum it up, yes, that's absolutely that has influence, that's for sure. When it comes to 3D, I would say that it's a kind of mix of sustainability and optimization. I would say that's for sure helps to reduce waste, and for companies like ours, who are aiming to reduce waste, and it's amazing to implement 3D design into the business processes. It helps us a lot to eliminate the waste on many levels when we create one-of-a-kind items. It helps to avoid mistakes in the design, and as we work with made-to-measure clothing, it helps a lot to visualize the unique avatar of every person we work with. But I would say that sustainability itself, when we talk about consumers, I'm not sure yet that it plays a huge role. However, last year, I guess that the impact was huge, as we could not travel, and absolutely that was, we were all obliged to rethink the whole strategy, and as a company and as a consumers as well. And we can see a rise of digital fashion. So of course, we have to wait for a while to see if we really will have two kind of wardrobes, physical and digital wardrobes. But at least we can see that there are many startups who are developing into this direction as well. But I would say that 3D is about optimization, that's for sure. And as a result, sustainability as waste reduction and the way to reduce and to avoid mistakes. I'd say that's for sure will help many businesses in the future. That's
great. Thank you, Nathalie. And Morgan, what's your take from Bold Metrics?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Nathalie, really well said. I agree with everything that Nathalie said, by the way, which was great. I think it's all interconnected. And when you look at, there's just been a big barrier to entry for consumers into an on-demand ecosystem, which is, if you rewind not very long ago, for somebody to actually get anything on demand, it meant they either had to go somewhere and get measured, or go somewhere and change into tight-fitted clothes and get into a body scanner, or try to measure themselves. And that's a huge barrier, right? That barrier has now been removed. With technologies like ours, we're seeing now that we can enable on-demand online in a really seamless and scalable way. And you really have, two key impacts here. One of them is just customer experience, right? How do you make it easy and accessible for the customer? Because if they have an experience that truly delights them around on-demand, then they're going to keep doing that. It's a different experience than what they thought it was. And some of that is actually just more consumer education that, okay, if you want to get something custom made for you, you don't have to drive to a tailor shop and spend half an hour getting measured. This can all be done digitally now. And the other side of it, just kind of dovetailing off of what Nathalie was saying is, consumers are having a greater and greater expectation around the sustainability efforts of the brands that they work with. And so this is allowing brands both to be more accountable, but also allowing consumers to then have the power to make these decisions of, okay, I want to buy something that I know is, ethically and responsibly sourced, but also isn't creating a huge amount of waste. And that's really where it ties into 3D, right? I've said this a few times in the past, which is, we are not 2D people, we are 3D people. And so being able to see everything in 3D allows designers to go much further when it comes to fit and sizing. And that all ties into, sizing inclusivity, which I think is an absolutely critical piece of the puzzle when you're looking at on-demand and being able to make clothes, not just for people that fit into certain buckets, but for every customer.
Amazing. So sustainability is a big part of it, but also about optimization, inclusivity, new opportunities for the consumer. So there's a lot going into this, which is really exciting to see. Next to you, Michael, similar to the previous question, do you think on-demand will ever be a better financial decision for a brand than ready-to-wear mass-produced goods? And do you think it's inevitable for on-demand to catch on with the mass market? And if you do think so, when do you think that's going to happen? Are there any products out there that shouldn't be on demand?
Well, I was pretty afraid of that question, actually, to be honest. But yeah, first of all, I think it really depends on the company and the size of the company and also on the location of the company, right? Because when you take a company that is already established on the market and got a supply chain, an established supply chain running properly since ages, it probably will take a lot of time and a lot of effort to shift it to on-demand. But I do think it makes also sense for big companies to do limited editions or small or mid-range quantities on demand, or to just do a certain part of the product on demand while producing maybe some parts still in a mass-produced way. So yeah, personally, I think there's no product that shouldn't be produced on demand, as it would be the most sustainable way. I think we are on the way to get there, but it probably will take a few more years in development and effort to get there.
Great. Yeah, let's see. Time will tell, but fingers crossed from all of us, I imagine. Now to you, Ganit. How do you think 3D and digital tech will make it to customers in the market? Do you think it's going to be through a marketplace, maybe through B2B partnerships, through brands? And do you see any standout technologies out there?
Yeah, so I think the personal connection now is getting much stronger these days between the consumers and the brand, and also individual designers. And that can really, it's really easy to approach and to ask for something that on demand. When I have a 3D scanner or an app, I can really have a good conversation with someone that I know just digitally. And the demand of personalization is really exists, and it's desired. And it's a privilege because we can, in the 19th century or before, it was always a tailor, as Morgan also said, that it's just been really just for a privileged people. But now everyone has an iPhone or a phone that already has everything inside embedded. And I think for me, the challenge is really about how you reverse engineering this data, this 3D data to like a garment that you can produce. And I think now also 3D printing allowing lots of possibilities that weren't exist. So for example, you can exchange digital files and someone can print it in their home or in a local place. So home printers or home equipment is something that is really crucial for the technology to develop.
That's great. And I want to open this question actually to the rest of the panel as well. I feel like there must be some other lurking technologies that maybe some of us haven't heard of. Do any of you see any standout technologies out there that will help bring digital tech straight to consumers?
I can jump on that one, Beth. I've really been noticing how AI is driving so much of what we do inside of the customization arena, the personalization arena. So much of what actually happens when you actually start doing the personalization revolves around this idea that we find some uncanny valleys out there. As Morgan was talking about, when we start to really designing for people of all shapes and sizes, certain designs don't work the way we expect them to. Branding especially becomes very difficult. in these situations. And we're only now becoming able to encode these rules and encode some of these design considerations into something that an AI can look at with us and help automate those processes. And a lot of that right now is having the AI and the designer work hand in glove in these processes. But we can see, I guess we're seeing fashion designers turn more into software developers in a sense, in that these people are constantly attached to the product throughout the product's lifetime, instead of just designing it and letting it go. And somehow that AI technology is enabling them to stay there with that product as they go. So yeah, it's that AI technology that's really enabling the role of the designer to change.
That's great. Yeah, we don't at Unspun quite have anyone who's fully software meets design, but they sit as close together as they can on the team. Thank you guys for the answer. And it's very exciting to see where this tech is headed. Next question is for three of you. And I added three because I'm personally very, very interested in this question, the answers. This is for Troy, Morgan, and Nathalie. Starting with you, Troy. There's a lot of tech out there that we've started to hear about. How involved do you think the customer wants to get into this digital and this 3D process? Do you think they actually want to design their products? And do they want to be trying on their products virtually? And then if yes, how accurate does that representation need to be?
So two parts of that question. So how involved does the person want to be in the design process? I think that we've seen in the research is that many people like having sliders and like being able to go in there, pretend like they're doing something, but that 90% will order the default that was presented to them when they were first offered it. So there's something really interesting in that people like to see the options, and yet they are not trained designers. They don't come with that those years of experience that really lead them to doing that. So I think it's almost a game as to how much control you do give to the designers or give to the end user, but that a designer has played a very large role in getting them there and helping them understand the product, in giving them some of the controls. It's more of like illustrating the design process via the control instead of actually letting them design their own thing. I think we saw, especially with the early customizers in shoes, we saw a lot of disappointment in that arena. And there's a reason for that. And I think it's important to recognize that reason. As to the second part of the question, I don't know. I guess I would probably tip that one over to Morgan. Now that I think about it, it's more challenging.
Well, Morgan, would you like to answer?
Sure. Yeah, and I think, with any of this, I look at the end-to-end process, right? Because it's really about like, how do you make that consumer experience easier? And a lot of that means removing friction from the process, right? And so, the first piece is, how does the consumer get their body into the system, right? And is that something that's like seamless and easy for them to do? At Bold Metrics, what we've done is built an AI body scanning technology that's very fast, seamless, but also highly accurate. And so it's something that a consumer can actually go through the entire end-to-end process and generate a 3D avatar in under 20 seconds. And they don't need to change into tight-fitted clothing. They don't need to take pictures. A lot of those things are big barriers to entry to get somebody into an ecosystem like that. And then to Troy's point, yeah, when it comes to design, less is more, right? It's sometimes simplicity is the better approach. I actually thought when Troy was talking about it, I thought it's so interesting. It reminds me of something I read a long time ago about Baskin Robbins, the ice cream shop. And I think the stat was like, they have 31 flavors, Baskin Robbins. And it's like 80% of the people buy either chocolate or vanilla that come in there, but they have 31 flavors. And so, how do you condense that down so that it's easy for somebody to customize, but there isn't too much there where it's overwhelming? And then, kind of looking at the second piece, I think, which is such an important point you brought up, which is uncanny valley. Okay, what happens now when I have a 3D version of myself and 3D version of the clothes layered on that? It really has to look photorealistic. I think the challenge that the industry has seen for a long time, and it's changing now, but the challenge has been, you've had these visualizations that look like a cartoon version of the person. And it's very hard to dress up a cartoon and feel like, oh, that's what it's going to look like on me. And so you have to get photorealism. You have to go past the valley into something that actually is convincing. But then it all ties back to the body data. like, is that accurate? And does that actually look like me? Because also something that's happened in the past is there's been a like estimation process of, well, here's a body that's like the most similar to you. And when you're looking at on-demand, you're looking at personalization, that's not good enough. It can't be similar to you. It has to be your actual body. It has to look like you. And that end-to-end process, I think, is what really will make consumers a lot more comfortable with the entire ecosystem.
That's great. I've noticed there's with some of our customers at Unspun, they don't necessarily want to confront themselves. So there is definitely kind of a tension there between like
Sure.
super accurate and is that too much info? And Nathalie, very curious to hear your thoughts on this question.
I think that I have a lot to say here because we work with unique designs like every single day, and we've seen. Well, like we were very disappointed at the very beginning when we offered a collection of clothes that could be made to measure and that could be customized the way the clients want. But we did not see a lot of success here. I guess the reason, like we all know, clients just don't want to, take a lot of responsibilities and they take what is offered. Quite often, unfortunately, the case. Well, unfortunately for us. But then, we changed the strategy a little bit. And then now what we actually do is that we ask our clients what they want to design. And that's a little bit different. So now they come with already like a vision, an idea. And we have an internal team of designers and stylists who actually work on bringing their ideas to life. So they outsource or delegate, they don't take a lot of responsibility. They just give the ideas. And that's our team who actually work a lot on, on bringing this to life. And I feel like this is where clients also feel more comfortable and more, more reassured about the whole process. And then when we introduced our 3D design into the processes, I feel like that was a great help for people who could not necessarily visualize the garments. We can create beautiful sketches, but they won't be realistic. And we see that there was a challenge for so many people. But now with 3D design, that still could be quite accurate and quite nice and very appealing to consumers. We feel like that was very it contributed a lot to to the popularity of our unique design service. And the main idea is also to, as we take virtual measurements, we can actually recreate the avatar of the person. Of course, we have a different face, and then that won't be 100% you, but it's still better than nothing, and that helps a lot to to get this idea of how this certain dress or a suit will actually fit on you, and then the colors, the textures. With 3D design, you can have it now. And I think what I also want to point at is that we have recently implemented VR, and well, it's still not perfect, that's for sure. We cannot, be interested in the items, but at least it can give the idea to consumers, just to use their phone and then to scan the product and to see it inside the room. It still gives something physical, even if it doesn't exist. It's still like even if you cannot even touch it, you can still feel the presence. I guess VR will be very helpful in overall strategy when we talk about made to measure and custom made business in general.
That's great. I would love to see a dress that I've designed in real life, but doesn't really exist. That's amazing. So we were speaking about scanning people or somehow getting their avatar into a digital device. Troy and Ganit, I want to jump to you next. First with Troy, where do you think these 3D and digital assets fall short of reality for customers? What parts of that do you think will never be fixable, will just always be a problem in digital? And what can we do to bridge that gap? And then in what ways can we make 3D and digital assets better than reality for customers?
So I was working with one of my students on a customized lingerie service a while back. And as she had worked in a lingerie store for quite a long time before she came to do her degree, she understood very well that very thin women actually needed a size or two larger than what was needed, and very larger women needed something that came in. And so one of the limitations that I think we really see in kind of 3D is the fact that we're working in 3D with empty objects, where human beings are full of bone and muscle and other things that are changed in shape by the clothing that we wear. And understanding how that internal structure of the body works, much less in movement, what happens, is a real limitation of where we're at right now in terms of 3D. I think a lot of the 4D scanning work that's happening in London and in Delft right now helps to take a look at some of this, but I think it's going to be another 3 or 4 years before we really bring some understanding to that area and how much it really truly affects clothing as we become more inclusive and we really do try to make these things work on everyone in a way that's interesting. But bringing that human body and that human person to the actual clothing, we can simulate it in the digital, but the simulation just doesn't meet the reality of it. And that's part of that uncanny valley. It isn't only that the human doesn't look real, but the clothing doesn't look real either. And so we see it at uncanny valley translating into the clothing as well. And so, yeah, more software is needed, more research is needed.
That's great. Well, that's job security for all of us, I guess. Ganit, to you, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I really agree with Troy about the design aspect. I think there is a really big gap now. If Morgan was saying about the cartoon of the body, now also the outfits need to be fit to reality. And I think in wearable technology, it seems to be very futuristic outfits all the time. And from my perspective, we always need to think about how clothes are behaving in the real world and how it was look in the past, and then translate these techniques to the new technology. So my inspiration to a lot of outfits are coming from craft methods or weaving or knitting, and then trying to see how the techniques of the technology can be embedded, techniques of the craft can be embedded in the new technology. And I think that's how we can try to bridge this gap. And I think it's also about adding another dimension to the outfits using the 3D technology. So until now, we are producing regular outfits, but if we are using 3D and virtual reality tools, we can add color change, we can add more personalization or shape change and test it really easily, and therefore bringing to consumer much more possibilities that could fit to them more.
Yeah, I agree. There are definitely some challenges, but also some opportunities. One opportunity that we've seen is that people can't see themselves in third person in real life. And so that's kind of an interesting opportunity on a screen, is that you don't have to bring your friend anymore to tell you how it looks from 10 feet away. You can now see yourself. So we had a few questions come in from the audience here. And since we're talking about 3D body scanning right now, one question was, and this is open to anyone, how is your company handling consumer privacy with 3D body scans? I don't know, maybe no one wants to touch that, but
I can talk about it because it's something important to us and that we think about a lot. And so like all the brands that we work with that we're doing AI body scans with, we actually don't collect any PII ourselves on the technology side. So it's the brands themselves that would have that data. I think it's really important that private data like that is not passed from brand to technology company, because then you have two people that are now supposed to hold that data. I think it's really important for consumers to trust a technology. If I'm a consumer and I trust a brand, that brand is safeguarding my credit card information, my purchase information. Like, they have a lot of safeguards to protect that. I don't think that technology companies should also be harboring that data and be necessarily trusted with that data, because for a consumer, I think that's a lot to ask for. And so for us, actually, we've built a lot of technology to make sure that when we get the data, there is no PII in it at all. All that stays with the brand. And so I think for consumers, you have to really give them something that they can trust both the accuracy and the scalability, but also trust the privacy, because that's so important to get somebody to do something.
Yeah, it's a lot of power there and a lot of responsibility. Completely agree. And it looks like Troy just put a resource there if anyone wants to see that. Anyone else want to take this question?
Can I actually just ping in on that? Svetlana Mironchika is a PhD in Eindhoven, and she did this amazing research into not treating people like objects, like how people feel when they're 3D scanned. And it was really fascinating to see that many people actually love being measured much more than they actually like being 3D scanned because of many of those privacy issues. And the fact that the thing that is created makes them look and feel like an object. So there's some barriers on the human interaction side, I think, that we could really address there. Opportunities as well.
That's interesting. We aren't a bunch of dolls, I guess. So similar to thinking about this from kind of previously we were talking about like a platform and systems level, Troy and Michael have what I think is a big question for you both. How can we use data-enabled manufacturing to create ecosystems of fashion? And starting with you, Troy.
I think what happens is something called iterative personalization. As you're working with the individuals and making things individually for them, we go past personalization into kind of an individualization that as we go through the wardrobe and we're building more than one thing, and then we start to build generations of things, we can actually use those things to see how they worked and how they fit the person, how they interacted with the person over their lifetime. And as we start to build those product lifetimes with people, especially in things like shoes, we can use machine learning to understand, how people slightly older, slightly larger than me are going to be wearing the clothes in 5 to 10 years. So we can actually think about, well, the average pair of shoes stays in a closet for 18 months. Can I actually make it work for that person, not for the now, but for that entire 18 months? And that locks people into these ecosystems fairly quickly.
And what's your take, Michael? Yeah.
I think a crucial part is the interface between production and 3D technologies, which everybody is talking about at the moment. And I think, or at least what we at Yokai Studios, we are really trying to find the interface between production and 3D workflows. And I think it's already existing because designers and developers, they use these 3D CAD softwares to design and develop the development garments with, and we use 3D CAD softwares to do kind of an offline toolpath programming of industrial robots. So actually we're working on plugins to streamline the 3D workflow to create a design to a production pipeline. And I think that would enable companies and brands to do in-house production, or at least in-house sampling, get rid of a lot of CO2 emissions through transport. And yeah, I think that's the ecosystem we should aim for.
Well, that's a really great segue from the very digital that we've been speaking about into how that becomes physical. Would really love to dig into, pushing physical on-demand production with these 3D assets. So to you, Nathalie, Michael, and Ganit, starting with you, Nathalie, how can digital assets help on-demand production specifically? And what has your company used, or what have you seen being used there? What level of digitization is necessary for the back-end production?
Sure. Like I've mentioned, we actually use 3D design to help our clients to visualize the clothing that we will be tailoring. So it helps a lot our production team, our design team, to agree with clients on what would be actually produced. So our case is a little bit unique because we do not have pre-designed garments in most cases for our clients, and we start from zero. So it's really crucial for us to make sure everybody understands what's been produced. And for us, it's mostly about visualizing the garment that will be physically created. I know that there are tech parks, and there are actually so many options now to get all the necessary information for the pattern makers. From our perspective, we have tested it a few times, and we are still into the process of testing. But when we deal with made-to-measure business, what we found out is they're still not very accurate, unfortunately. And, you know, but I think it's just a matter of time. So it's not like, you know, it's not a ready solution for us yet to get the design, you know, directly from the 3D software and to pass it to our production team and that let's say, oh, that will be great. No, we still have to, you know, still have to work a lot with the tailors and pattern makers to make sure that everything that's been designed is actually physically can be produced. So there is a huge way of, you know, one thing is to design the item, and then the second thing is to actually be able to produce. Sometimes, you know, it's not a very straightforward process with 3D at the moment. But like I said, the primary goal for us is to make sure about the design. And, you know, we're still, you know, moving slowly from this 3D visualization instead of sketches to our production team. And then it also takes time to educate the production team. So, yeah, but I just hope that with the development of the technologies, one day we will see a very smooth process. That would be the dream for us to get the patterns correctly made straight away from the 3D software. I know that some companies do so, but they create a lot of prototypes and samples to make sure that everything is accurate. So for us, as we try to eliminate the waste, this is not the best solution, as we do not create samples. When we send, you understand what I mean? You have, I guess, a similar, yeah. So we just, you know, work very closely, still like the old way with our pattern makers.
It's great. Well, someday it will be easier. We'll get there. And Michael, how do you use 3D tools to help you produce on demand?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think we already reached the level of digitization by implementing all these 3D CAD softwares for designers and developers. We use it, as I already mentioned before, by also using the interface of the 3D software to program toolpaths for robotic arms. Of course, we are facing limitations there as well, as a 6-axis industrial robot does production different than a human being. But that's actually the point that I really like, because by knowing these limitations, it creates kind of a new design language, because you have to think about these limitations already when you design the garment. So it leads to new aesthetics, to new silhouettes. So maybe by using these technologies, our clothes look different in the future. And yeah, every technology innovation led somehow to a new look of products. And yeah, maybe by implementing robots in production lines, we suddenly get our clothes look different than before. And it's a new era of design. So
that's great. And Ganit, I know that your production or the creation of your pieces is also very automated. So what does that look like for you, that process?
Yeah, so actually I really agree with Michael about the new aesthetics, because I'm taking lots of inspiration from the 3D body scan I'm working on, and it's sometimes it's really my inspiration to build the garment. And for example, like this garment made from 3D printing onto a recycled fabric, but also I used 3D printing with recycled materials. So as a designer, I really think not just about the 3D scanning and the outfit, but also what kind of material I'm using and how I can really think about the whole process when I'm thinking about production. And I think also in the material perspective, using 3D tools really allows you also to work on specific properties to each material and I worked a lot with multi-color and multi-material 3D printing. So that's also another level of customization when you can really control on each voxel of the printing and really customize the areas inside the body through the fabric.
Amazing. And Troy, you had something to add as well to this conversation.
Yeah, just to add on what Michael and Ganit were saying there, I in my PhD work created my own shoe company, and it actually went on to become its own thing. But what I found was really interesting is that the off-the-shelf software that exists out there today is not made to do this. And so a lot of what we had to do was actually getting students who could design shoes and could write their own software to make shoes, and walk them through some very basic mathematics in order to come to a basically shoe compiler, something that could think like the machine was going to manufacture the shoe. And so I see a lot of opportunity there to write new software and to come up with new ways of doing this, that the person who is writing the software also understands the manufacturing technology and yet is writing the tools for the designer to really build that design space that Michael was talking about and Ganit as well.
Amazing. Okay, so we have one last question. We have a lot of Q&A also for the end, so I hope you guys are excited for that. So Morgan, I want to end this last question with you, and then we can jump to Q&A and see if there's time for everyone to talk about, one wish they have for on-demand and or 3D assets, and maybe a plug if we have some time as well. So Morgan, last question, how do you think returns should work for the on-demand model? And how do you think digital assets can help reduce or eliminate issues with physical returns?
Yeah, great question. And I think this really ties into something I was talking about in the beginning, which is really how on-demand, in a lot of ways, can really get us much closer to where I think we need to be when it comes to sizing inclusivity, right? And it's all this, comes back to, how well does a brand understand their customer? And this is the problem with standard sizing. The reason why I think on-demand really is the future in a lot of ways is that it's very hard to know. For a long time, brands have said, I think this is who wears my medium. And there's been a broad-based study of, X number of people in this country, and that's the country I'm selling in. And so I'll take the average of that, and I'll assume that my customer in this age range, this is them. But then they never know if that was actually true or not, because you don't know who actually is wearing the clothes and who's buying and who's returning it. And that returns data is such an important piece of the puzzle. I mean, for us with Bold Metrics, along with powering on-demand, we also power ready-to-wear, and we actually take in the purchase and returns data and use that to update machine learning models so that brands are starting to understand more and more, oh, here's who's actually buying our medium, here's who's actually buying our large. Especially with like traditional pattern grading, if you're making a pattern for a medium and grading up to a double extra large, well, guess what? The double extra large isn't actually made for the person that's wearing it, but they need that data. And this is really where I think when you look at, coming back to your question here of like, what role do returns play in the on-demand ecosystem? You're always going to see lower returns because you're making something for somebody. So, we see for clients that, use us and in an on-demand ecosystem, you're seeing return rates in the, 2 to 3% range. You should see very low returns because you're making it for somebody. You should make sure that it's good. But if it's not, and there's something wrong with that, rather than following kind of a typical process that the apparel industry has followed in the past, which is, well, if they return it, just like give them the option to reorder. I think it's also very important to emphasize the learning you can get from on-demand, because maybe it is that you start to notice a trend of, oh, interesting, when we give someone of this body shape and size, and maybe it's someone that's larger than your normal customer, smaller than your normal customer, but you start to find out things like fit preference. And that's what I always look at is like there's two sides to this fit problem. One is going, great, we have all the body measurements. Oh, I bet we know what size they'll wear. The other is looking at that feedback loop and using that returns data to understand, okay, was that correct? Or do people like to wear it a little looser or a little tighter? Does that vary geographically? Does that vary by body shape and size? So really using that data to improve the end-to-end process.
Some really great points there. And at Unspun, we try to encourage people to return their products when they're not super happy with it, because it's really important for us to get that information. I think if, without the on-demand model, without any sort of custom fit, brands are happy to say, no, please keep it. Like, you really like it, trust us. But for us, it's like, we kind of nag people after they receive their jeans to like tell us everything they can, just because it's so valuable. Like you're talking about, that information really can go for a far way. All right. Anyone else like to take this question on returns before we jump into Q&A?
Yeah, I think I can add something. I absolutely agree with you that it's so important to, not to blame people if there is something wrong with the item, because it's such a unique experience for so many of us. And there are not so many people willing to try custom-made items. So we do the same, actually. The level of return is very low on our side as well. But if it happens, we're always curious why that happened, and we try to talk to clients and get all the information we can why that was not according to their expectations. And no, I think we have to be very careful here. We cannot afford to lose clients. It's so hard to attract people and to get new audience who actually want to try custom-made items. And, it's just such a shame to lose this opportunity.
I completely agree that sometimes we have such a different relationship with our customers. I imagine you do as well. And they're willing to share much more than I think they would with a standard brand. So the photos that you get are kind of funny sometimes, a little TMI sometimes, but it's really great info. Okay, I'm going to jump into the Q&A if that's all right with everyone. So this is open to anyone who has an opinion or a thought. This was actually the first question that came to us about half an hour ago, and it's very broad. What trends do you see accelerating the use of 3D and on-demand manufacturing? So very, very broad topic, but if anyone would like to talk about the trends that they're seeing.
I can share one quick perspective on it, but I think this all ties back to the key trend of how do you make it easier for the consumer. I think a lot of times it's easy to be focused on the software and manufacturing side and forgetting that, but a person has to be able to do something to get into that. And so I think it's really like, how do you reduce friction to make it easier for somebody to be able to get their body data, get information about their preference design, kind of like to Troy's point before of, if you let someone customize something, there's 60 different sliders, they might not do that, right? Like, how do you make this a lot easier for the customer so that then the data that you have in the software is, highly accurate data? That's how it scales.
Can I just add to that, Morgan, that I also see the human-centered design element finally seeping into the fashion world, this idea that we are working with individual people, and we can work with individual people, that ICT technologies allow us to do that. So we don't have to make demographic groups, and we don't have to make all these assumptions about people. We can actually ask the person themselves who they are, what they need. So we can customize, personalize, and individualize things.
Spot on. Yeah, totally agreed.
And yeah, off of that comment about individualization, this is a somewhat related question. How do you see designers being trained for different body or foot shapes?
You have to give them time to do it. It's, we're so, especially in shoe design, we make size 8s and we make size 8s. That's all we do. And it's the first time that a designer has to do a men's size 17, that they really have to throw out everything they've ever thought of before about line proportion and just the whole system and redo it. And that takes some learning. And so they need a moment to grow.
At Unspun, we collaborate with other brands to bring the custom fit to them. And so we have our software and our product teams working with designers at other brands. And it's I'm sure a lot of you have dealt with this as well, but it's kind of a reframing. You have to kind of look at the whole thing differently when that designer is used to thinking about their design on a size set of people, like it should look like this, this, and this, and that, and they kind of stop there to suddenly an infinite number of people could be wearing this. And how does their design change across all of these body shapes is really something that's, I think, difficult to grasp. And what does style mean when it's a relationship to the body and not a particular size set? So that's been a fun challenge for us. And so far it's gone very well, but it ends up being, a couple of months longer than we kind of expected at the beginning, because we are often trained into things a certain way. All right, let's jump to another question here. Will we see a Zara scale clothing brand transform its processes to an on-demand model, or will this model share the same piece of the pie with traditional manufacturing brands? So I think if anyone understands that, go for it. I think my take on it from a question standpoint is how quickly will Zara scale clothing brands kind of take on the on-demand model?
Yeah, I guess if I understand it, I think what they're saying is, when will a on-demand only brand become as big as Zara? Maybe, possibly. I personally think it's an inevitability. The timeline is the question, right? But I think it's absolutely going to happen. And, fast forward 50 years from now, and hopefully we're all alive and remembering this talk, and we'll be thinking back about it and going, wow, remember when we were talking about that like it was in the future? And now, can you believe that like 50 years ago, we used to just try to bucket people into like 5 or 6 size categories? I mean, I think at some point there's going to be a tipping point and it's going to switch. And I can't remember whether I think it was either Nathalie or Ganit that said, I think it was Ganit actually that was talking about, well, really, eventually you're going to have like clothing printers in your home. And now we talk about that and it's like, oh, that sounds crazy. And it's like, well, everything sounded crazy until it happened. That will also happen. I think all of that will enable an ecosystem where on-demand becomes the standard.
Great. I'm going to throw in one. Oh, Nathalie, please go for it.
Yeah, I just want to add that, in my opinion, how fast actually people and consumers will appreciate the whole idea of having something custom made, and if there will be really a demand for that. I think this is the key question, because unfortunately for the moment we do not see like a queue of people or a line of people willing to order a t-shirt, short trousers, I don't know. There are still, the demand for having custom-made items is very limited. From our side, I think bridal wear, this is where we see the demand, but just because that was, it's traditional. It takes time to bring people online and to design their own wedding dresses with us. But I mean, the whole idea, it's there. It's something that has existed for many years. And with casual wear and capsule wardrobes, it's a little bit different story. They can, why do they have to design? They can actually go outside, and there are so many options for them. They don't have to waste. They don't have to, invest their time. And, financially, that's much more reasonable to buy something off the rack. But then we have people who either, cannot find anything according to their style preferences, or it's maybe the fit, body measurements, or maybe they just, they share our values for sustainability and they just don't want to buy anything off the rack. And I mean, the group of people is still not that huge, to bring companies that do custom-made clothing to the level of Zara or H&M or, whatever. And of course, the technologies will play a huge role here, because we're still not there. I mean, we're just, we're starting and we're testing everything, and we can see that there is still a long way to go. And I guess it's just, hopefully in a few years, this is where the demand will meet the technologies and people who will be willing to bring that to life.
Yeah, and it'll be a really great day when Zara does go online, because they have so much impact, right? And possibly, we know negative impact. So to reduce that with on-demand would be huge. And Ganit, it looks like you have a comment.
Yeah. Also, I really agree. I just think that also the uniqueness now is really something that consumers are really think about, because you don't want to have the same shirt that someone has in the wedding. So maybe if you will design something for you and it will be really customized in your preference, that's something that will be really a trigger to use customize. And I think it's also going to another point that is, sometimes it's a problem solving. So if you have specific requirements in your body, or there is something that you need to fix, or so, I think fabric has really potential to help you hide things, or things that will help you even with medical applications. So I think there is lots of potential in the consumer, also in the personal connection to solve problems.
Go for it, Troy.
Yeah, just to build on that a little bit, one of the interesting things that I think we found in the shoes is that you can start to see latent problems developing in feet over years. And this moment that we can say to an insurance company that we can push that hip replacement or knee replacement back by 10 years and save you X amount of money, these things become a lot more interesting in terms of societal value, especially in Europe, because they see greater value there. So, when the health insurance company is subsidizing the cost of on-demand, magic things start to happen as well.
This is great. Super inspired by this conversation. I want to close up giving each of you about 30 seconds to talk about one wish that you have for on-demand and or digital fashion, and a plug if you want to take the opportunity to plug yourself or plug what you represent. So let's start with you, Nathalie.
Sure, just want to thank you. Thanks everyone for this exciting conversation. I think that was just great, to share the experience and to discuss the custom-made future business as well. So on my side, I think I just wish that we have more people appreciating and valuing custom-made service and having something made specifically for them. Without questioning too much the price point, because I feel like that there is still a lot to be done. And, I just want to, if anybody wants to try to create their own custom-made items, or they have been dreaming of ordering something that, doesn't exist anywhere else, we'll be happy to see them in Dressarte, and all of you, of course. And I'm very open to conversation if anybody has any questions. I know it's so hard for this industry, especially in custom-made direction, to find people to talk to, because there are not so many of us who are working in this direction. So I will be very open to conversation and further partnerships. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nathalie. Morgan?
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, just to echo what Nathalie was saying, really great panel, great group of people. I have to say, Beth, looking at the jeans behind you has made me realize I need to order a pair of unspun jeans. So you'll be hearing from me for that. Really good group. I mean, as far as like a wish for on-demand, I think I'm seeing a lot of it come true. I mean, I believe that we're going to see some absolutely transformational things take place in the apparel industry that at their core are going to make the industry more sustainable. I think on-demand is one of the key pieces to the puzzle to really promoting sustainability, but also providing a much better experience for consumers. And, as far as us at Bold Metrics, what we look at is how do we provide, very accurate body data using our AI body scanning technology, so we can make it incredibly easy for a shopper that wants to do on-demand, but may not want to take pictures of themselves and change in tight fitted clothing, may not want to go through like a 1 to 2 minute process. They want that part to be easy, so then they can focus on the design and really getting that unique piece and customizing it. And I think, making that project or that entire process as seamless and frictionless as possible, I think is going to be the key to on-demand really taking off with the masses.
Amazing. Thanks, Morgan. And Michael?
First of all, thanks for the invite. Great talk, great speakers, really interesting topic. My wish for on-demand would be to enable creatives, designers, small brands, and individuals to get their designs produced, because I know that it is really hard for small labels, especially here in Europe, to get their stuff produced, because all the slots from big production facilities are most of the time taken by the big brands. So in my work and in the work that we do at Yokai, we really don't want to give the mass producing industry another tool to speeding up their processes and creating even more garments that are not needed. We would like to enable everybody to, similar to that what Ganit said with the 3D printers, to get that DIY thought back into their daily lives and start creating. And that's my wish for the future.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Michael. Ganit?
Yeah, so I also agree with everyone. It's a great panel, and me and Michael were working on the same grant called Reframe, which has really a lot of potential also in on-demand, and lots of communities that think forward how we can make customized garments. So that's also something, I guess, building the community around these topics. And for me, my wish also really is to introduce more material science and designers and bridge this gap together to make on-demand materials. So after we have the 3D scanner, after we have the all the data, how we can really produce the customized fabrics. And it's all ending up in the materials and in more sustainable approach to use materials and new technology inside the properties of the materials itself.
Thank you, Ganit. And Troy, last word.
Yeah, quickly, thanks all. That was really inspiring. I'm happy to see so many people doing this. My wish is that we can make on-demand become more circular, more distributed, and more localized. And I really am inspired to see you all doing that. And I really look forward to the day that we can truly make things in a generative way. And I'm constantly looking at tools and toolkits that allow more people to do that. So as an applied sciences professor, we're constantly looking for companies and people who want to build those things that we can apply for grants with.
Thank you so much. Agree with Troy. Super inspiring panel. Thank you so much. I'm going to have a really good day after today.